And with that, I'm going to stop and hand over the mic to my son.
Guys, I just want to start by saying I am so moved being here today. Part of the testimony I'm going to share is how this group changed my life. You know, I first came to faith, and a year later was an intern with BJ and reverse commuting from Manhattan every Friday morning to come to Jim Lane's house. And really, the way I came to know the Lord was through this group. And just being here this morning, and you guys, us singing "Knowing You," Lord, I think you guys will relate to this. You often don't realize how blessed you are in a season until it's over. And just being here this morning with this group of men, I don't have this in my life right now, and so I just want to start by making you aware of what a gift this is, and to take advantage of it, because to have a group of men that you can actually be real with about what's going on, you know, behind the scenes in your real life, that will embrace you and help you find the Lord's purpose through that, is an amazing gift. And this is an amazing, truly amazing group. So I'm so thankful to be here this morning. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Yeah. So So I want to start. So I'm, here to share my story of how I came to faith in the Lord. It obviously starts in trauma with my father. It was a rough upbringing. Actually, I mean, my story does not begin with horrible trauma, darkness. I never had my fist raised up to God, like, why is this happening to me? My story started the opposite way. I had a very happy childhood. I was probably saw from that picture, I was a pretty happy-go-lucky kid. You know, I mean, that smile, I think, you can disagree if you want, but I think pretty indicative of who I was my whole childhood. I was very blessed. I had loving parents that gave me every opportunity. I think, if anything, I was so busy going after life and exploring things. You know, I was always involved in 3 sports at once, and I got into theater and singing, and I was, my dad pushed me academically, and so I was always so busy. If I lacked anything, or if there was a shadow side to my childhood, I think is that I spent very little time reflecting on anything. You know, it's not that I did not believe in God, I just never really gave him a thought, to be honest. I just was so involved in what I was doing, it never occurred to me, like, why am I doing this? I was just sort of enjoying it, right? And so it was not until I left for college. I remember my dad, my parents dropped me off to college, so I did well in high school. I ended up getting into Dartmouth, and they drove me up to New Hampshire, and they said their goodbyes, and when I got back to my dorm room, there was a letter sitting on my pillow of my dorm room, and it was a letter from my dad. And it had all of his words of wisdom of, all right, Ty, you're going off into the world now, and, you might want to consider these things. And the last thing, I remember he even numbered, he's a lawyer, so he numbered each sort of item of wisdom. And the last one in the letter was, Tyler, you should read a little bit of the Bible every day. It'll get you through it's gotten me through the hard times. I think it will help you too. And so I dutifully ignored that advice for a few years. I think that same night, if I remember correctly, I was on the tennis team at Dartmouth, and I was there for preseason. And if I recall correctly, that same evening after that beautiful advice, I think they were holding me upside down by my ankles doing a keg stand. So I didn't get, all that to say, I did not get to respond to many of those words of advice immediately. And the first couple years for me at Dartmouth were a lot like my whole childhood to that point. I was after it. I was involved with everything. I don't think I ever took a minute to think about what was happening. I was just all in to all the things that I was doing. And it wasn't until my so I had been pursuing becoming a singer and an actor. I was also studying psychology, and I had a plan for my life. I don't know if any of you guys will relate to that. I knew where I was going. I was going to be a Broadway star. I was going to be a therapist on the side, and I was going to change the world, you know? I might become a pro tennis player for a while. Actually, I was too short for that, so that became clear that wasn't going to happen. But
you were quick.
and this guy knows because he was one of my tennis coaches for a long time. Yeah, I could chase down the balls. That I couldn't hit him as hard though. So it was my junior year. So finally, a couple years into college at Dartmouth, you take a gap term where you go off and do whatever, pursue the things that you're interested in. So I came home, and I was living at home in New Jersey, and I was commuting into the city and studying music with a Metropolitan Opera star, actually, who was teaching me voice. And so I'm pursuing, going after that life. But I was home. My friends weren't there. All my high school friends were in college. My college friends were obviously at college. I had a little more time on my hands. And at the same time, I started realizing that the professional reality of becoming a singer and an actor was really different than the amateur's dream. The guys that I was emulating to become were traveling on the road 10, 11 months of the year. You get in these shows and you go around the country, or if you're an opera singer, you're in one house 1 month and another house the next month. And they all were on their second or third marriage, and many of them were alcoholics. And I just realized maybe this life is not, that these guys are all living, is not what I'm actually looking for. And for the first time in my life, I had a question mark sort of sitting over my head. Maybe the plan that I'm developing here isn't what I thought it would be. And if that's true, that was a crisis. So what am I going to do if my plan is not going to come to fruition? And so I'm home, and I have a little more time on my hands. And I remember that letter that my dad wrote me when I went away to college. Gosh, it's a little emotional. And particularly that last piece of advice, why don't you read a little bit of the Bible every day? It has helped me, Tyler, in my hard times. I think it will help you. And so I say, what the heck? I'm gonna crack it open, right? So I just started in Matthew 1, the New Testament, and I just started reading every day. And I'm reading the Bible, and I know that this is not true for everyone, but for me, probably because I was raised in a loving home, I didn't have a lot of confusion or trauma in my history. I'm reading this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. I think this is true. But I had no idea what to do about that or what that meant for me in my own personal life. But I'm reflecting on it, and I'm like, God is real. And if you're real, then, do you have an opinion about what I'm going to do with my life, right? And so all this is churning inside of me. Finally, New Year's Eve of my junior fall, I've been dating this girl for 3 or 4 years, so we were pretty serious. We're together on New Year's Eve, and we're making New Year's resolutions together. I don't know if any of you guys will relate to this, but it turns out that this girlfriend of 3 or 4 years at that point had a New Year's year resolution, not just for herself that she wanted to share. She had one for me. So she said to me, Tyler, I don't think that this, professional performer life is what you actually are looking for. And I think you should find something else, another plan for your future. And this will tell you a little bit about the state of our relationship and why I'm with Audrey today and not with her. My response to that was like, what? Who are you to tell me what I should do with my life, right? And that conversation was over quick, and I stormed off. And I remember being fuming as I drove away that night, and I was particularly angry because, you might relate to this too, because I knew she was right. And that really, I was so caught off guard by the fact that other people were seeing the same thing that I was seeing about my own life. And it just caused me to panic because I had never considered that I would not be the author of my own future, right? And it was hitting me like a ton of bricks. And so I got home that night, and I went to bed, and I'm laying on my back, looking up at the ceiling, and for the first time in my life, I'm 20 years old, it occurs to me, Jesus, do you have a plan for my life? And I'm laying there, and for the first time in my life, in a serious way, I invite the Lord to tell me if he has an opinion about what I'm doing with, this life I've been given. And so I say, Jesus, I think I said it out loud, actually. Jesus, do you have a plan for my life? And guys, this hasn't happened to me since, so, don't feel like I don't know if you've had this experience. You might feel like, whoa. But I'm looking up at the ceiling, and between me and the ceiling, a word appears before my eyes. And it says, and it's like in flashing light, like a Broadway billboard, right? And it says minister. I grew up in like a old New England WASP family. Like we didn't talk about God speaking to us and there were no flashing lights that I had heard. I didn't know that happened. I didn't know this was a thing, right? So I'm seeing this, and then Jesus spoke to me. And I don't think if someone else had been in the room, like they would have heard the voice that I heard. It was not audible. But as clear as day, Jesus responded to my question and said, Tyler, I made you to be a minister for me. And I have to say that when I heard that voice, it was not the voice of a stranger. I knew who he was. And I knew suddenly, oh, you're the one that's been here my whole life. And I never gave you a second thought. You have always been here watching over me. And finally, I've turned, like Moses turning to the burning bush. He was 80 years old. I wonder how many times Moses walked by that bush or how many years had God been trying to get his attention? I don't know. It's obviously hearsay. But the point is that he was there, and he had always been there. And I knew it was the voice of my loving Father. And this is the other thing that happened. In that moment when Jesus told me, I made you to be a minister for me, suddenly all the stars of my life aligned. I was like, that is why I love to get up in front of people and communicate. I'm not an actor. I'm a preacher.
Come on now.
That's why I love to move people's hearts and take them somewhere. And not that there's anything wrong, obviously, with acting and performing, but I knew that is why I have this gift. I thought it was to do this, but actually God had another plan that had never even occurred to me in my whole life. I'll tell that part in a minute, actually. But yeah, I'm gonna. So minister. I'm going to be a preacher. The other thing is I was studying psychology, and the other thing that I loved to do was listen to people and help them with their problems. I was always the friend in high school and middle school and college who was sitting there listening to people, and they were unloading on me, and I just had that compassion inside of me. Before I even gave God a second thought, God had given me that, right? He had given me that gift, right? And so I suddenly realized I'm not a psychologist, I'm a pastor. And see, the crazy thing is that although I did actually grow up in a Christian home, there were no ministers in our world, And so I literally, besides the hour where you're at church on Sunday morning, I had no idea what a minister even did. Now, years later, my dad told me that my middle name, James, I was named after my great-great-great-grandfather, who was a Methodist minister, James Bartholomew. I was named after him purposefully, but that I actually didn't meet him since he died probably 50 years before I was born. But how amazing that God, led my parents to give me the name of the last minister that was in our families 5 or 6 generations ago, right? But anyways, I came downstairs the next morning, and I was like, Mom, Dad, I figured out what I'm going to do with my life. Because I think they kind of were aware of the fact that I was like, is this going to work, this performer thing? And they were like, oh, what? They're like, finally, like he's got a plan. I said, I'm a minister. And they were like, are you a Christian? We thought you were a frat boy. Like, what? Who are you, right? Like, where'd our son go, right? And they were like, okay, Tyler, you're a minister. Like, sure, right? And like, what will he be doing next week with his life, right? Like, junior in college, right? But somehow it stuck because it was just so my Father revealing to me who I am. It was not like, think about doing this, Tyler. It's like, this is who you are. And so it did stick. But as I said, I knew I was called to be a minister. I just had no idea what a minister did, right? And so 6 months go by, a year go by, and I'm like, I remember one day I had a conversation with my dad. I said, Dad, I really need to learn what it is that a minister does. Do you know any ministers that I could maybe, when I graduate, go an apprentice for and sort of learn the trade, right? And I thank Jesus. I thank the Lord. He's so good that my dad, the one minister that my dad really had a relationship with in his life was B.J. Weber. And so when I said, do you know anyone that I could go and learn from, talk to? B.J. had an internship program where he would have not only, have people in his life a little, they would come and move in with him and live life with him for a whole year. And so, what an amazing providential thing. My dad could have known any minister, like a religious, institutional, professional, right, who was on a totally different track than what I was looking for, but the Lord led me to BJ. And, through BJ, the Lord led me to this group. And I'm not saying this, I probably wouldn't mention this if I were giving my testimony at another group, but I'm not doing this to kiss NCS's butt. This is reality, that it is in this group, not in this building, but in Jim Lane's house, where I discovered that what happened to me that night, New Year's Eve, my junior year, was not an anomaly, that God wanted to know me, and that he wanted me to know him. And I can remember sitting in Jim's living room one morning. I was trying to remember the name. I don't know, Paul, Dennis, Dan, some of you guys might know. There was a guy from the Moody Bible Institute that came to speak one morning in Jim's, I'm almost positive that's where he was from, but I cannot for the life of me remember his name. Yes, I think it was. Yeah. Joe, that's exactly who it was. Yeah. Oh my gosh, and he gave this message. I felt like the Lord was like, I am talking to you, right? And I'm so new to everything. I could tell you stories of the way BJ just turned my life upside down. If you knew BJ, he was, Mike, you were saying last night, the first time you met BJ, he's like, hey, you want to go to a mission trip with me in Africa, right? Like BJ knew how to pull you out of where you were into, the chat, like what God had for you in your life. And it's just, we don't have time this morning to talk about that. But anyways, I can remember sitting there and Joe Stoll was talking. He basically gave this message that said, if no one else in all of history had ever fallen away from the Lord, and if Adam and Eve were still walking with God, but you fell, do you know that Jesus would have come and died on the cross just so that you could be reconciled to your Father? And that was one poignant moment, but it was really this community and this ethos that it's not about religion. It is about a personal relationship with Jesus, that God wants to know you and he wants you to know him. And in that moment, I knew this is going to become the chief pursuit of my life. I knew that I felt like the Father was saying to me, I want to know you. And I was saying back to him, I want to know you. And, okay, tone it down, Tyler. And so I could talk forever about that, but I know our time is fairly limited, and I just wanted to share with you some of what the Lord has shown me, because I feel like, BJ, one thing that BJ did for me is he gave me 3 years where my only responsibility was to find out who I was in the Lord. That space is a remarkable gift. And in that time, through him and this group and the different mentors and just people he exposed me to, and the time and space he allowed me to have, I did learn, I think in a special way, how to communicate with my Father and how to live my life with Jesus as my guide and my shepherd. And so I wanted to share with you just a little bit of what I've learned, because I feel that I want to give back to this group what this group gave to me. So, guys, I think a lot of times we can think that God is out there. He's distant. He's remote. He's either, the two pictures that I think men and women often have about who God is, he's either the one up there evaluating and wagging his finger when we get things wrong, like that is not measuring up, or he's like the dad that is asleep on the couch with a beer in his hand, like basically removed and disinterested, right? But the reality is that it's not that God is absent or aloof or disinterested. The reality is that we are so fully immersed in the presence and goodness of God in our lives, and this is what I realized the first time that I really turned to him with an openness as to what he was calling me to do, is that I said this to the guys that were here last night, so I apologize for repeating myself, but we're like fish swimming in the waters, the vast waters of the Pacific Ocean. And we're so fully immersed in this water, it's so fundamental to how we operate and live our lives, that if you swam up to a fish in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and said, "Mr. Fish, what's it like swimming in these vast waters of the ocean?" His response would probably be, "What's water?" It's not that he wasn't in water, it's that he just wasn't aware of the blessing that water was in his life. However, if you got a hook in Mr. Fish's mouth and yanked him out of the ocean, he would realize pretty quickly how much water actually helped him live his life, and you'd probably ask to be plopped back in there pretty quickly, right? And I think that is more a picture of the reality of the life that we are living. We swim around in the presence and goodness of God every moment of our lives, but often oblivious to how blessed we are. And so what the Lord has taught me to do in my pursuit of being more connected to him and being in more of like an intimate relationship and ongoing conversation with him is this, and I want to share it with you. And I thought, if we want to meet with the Lord, turn to the Lord, connect with the one that we're always swimming in the presence of, this is how I've learned to do it, that is so simple and so effective that it's almost offensive, because when I first realized how easy it was to talk with my Heavenly Father, how present he was to me already and how oblivious I was, I couldn't believe all the time that I had lost. But the Lord can recapture it so quickly and bring us up to speed, and it's not a problem. So this is what I do when I want to talk to the Lord. The first thing I do is I find a quiet place. In the beginning, I think it's really helpful to find a truly quiet place where you're not going to be disturbed. As time goes on, I think you'll find that the quiet place is actually inside of your own heart, and you can actually make that quiet, yourself quiet on the inside, so that you can even be communicating with the Father in the chaos of everyday life. But in the beginning, actually find an undisturbed place. Once you're there, all you have to do is turn to the light of the one that you are already in the presence of. So the Father is already, he's here in this room right now. Jesus is with us. And he is the one that every ounce of peace and joy and goodness that we are experiencing in this moment is coming from. It's as if it's like a trail of breadcrumbs. That goodness, that sense of the peace that we are blessed by in this moment. And if you will follow that trail of breadcrumbs and turn in faith, you will realize that the person that goodness is flowing from in this very moment is our Father. It is Jesus. And so we just turn in faith. You find a quiet place and you just turn in faith to the one who is already here in the light, right? We have to turn away from anxiety, fear, anger, all the other things that pull our attention away from that place of peace and goodness. And then once we're in that place, you just start talking. You ask the Lord a question, and then you listen for his response that comes from that light. And so what I find is very helpful, especially in the beginning, is to get a journal. Because there's two reasons for that. One, because when you write down what you are saying to God and what God is saying to you, when you're just in your own head, it can all get muddled together very easily. But you will find if you actually write down what you said to God and then what you felt the Lord was saying back to you from that place of the light of his presence, there is a difference between your voice, what I'm saying, and what the Father is saying to you from that place where he is. And so the other reason why it's really helpful to write down what God says to you is because as soon as you leave that place of peace, the world's going to come at you again and the chaos that's surrounding you. And it's so helpful as an anchor for our soul to return to what the Lord said to you. The other thing, the fourth thing I would say, so you find a quiet place, you turn to the Lord, you write down what he says to you, and then you have to implement what he has told you you should do when you're in that place with him. You have to put it into practice. So I said this to the guys last night, and I'll say it again. If I wanted to become Arnold Schwarzenegger, now that is a lost cause anyways, but if I desired to somehow become a bodybuilder, which would be a fruitless task, I couldn't just go to the library and read about bodybuilding. If I learned about how you become a bodybuilder, I still have to pick things up and put them down in order to grow the muscles, right? And it is the same in our life of faith. If you want to know that your Father is really speaking to you, then you have to put into practice what he says. What he says is the way that you should go, because otherwise you will never see how he wants to come through for you in your life. But when you do step out in faith in the direction that God is leading you, he will back up what he said to you, and it will confirm to you, you're really here. I'm really hearing from you. You really do have a plan for my life. But if we don't take the risk of allowing him to lead us out into his purpose, it will become just like a book in the library, right? It will be fruitless in our lives. So I hope that I really desired this morning to give back to this group what this group gave to me in my life. And so I want to encourage you. It is true of every man and probably every woman, but I think especially with men, we're independent. We want to feel that we are, like I said about my story, like I have a plan for my life. I can make it happen. We don't like to admit that we're vulnerable and that we need help. But if each of us will take the time and actually do this, not just hear what I'm saying, but put it into practice, take the time to humble ourselves and turn to our Father and open ourselves up to what he would say to us about all the different areas of our life and what we could do with that, what he would have us do in our lives. I truly believe that my experience was not, just for me. It's not an anomaly. It is what he desires for each of us. He has something in every area of our lives that he wants to share with us. And Jesus said in John 10, "My sheep hear my voice," and that the enemy comes to steal and kill and rob us, destroy our lives. But our Father comes, and Jesus comes to give us life, and that more abundantly. And if we will turn to him, I literally have 18 seconds left. If we will turn to him, he will lead you into life. And so I just pray that you will take the opportunity to try that, because I know that if you try that, like it was for me, God will intervene in your life and lead you into his purpose that is higher and greater than you ever could have thought or imagined. I never would have thought that I would be in ministry. It never even occurred to me before that night. But I know it is the fulfillment of who I was created to be, and I'm so thankful to be doing it here with you this morning. So God bless you guys.